The Blue Mustang Incident. On June 13, 2006, Luis Jiménez worked in his studio in Hondo, New Mexico. He was 65 years old and a renowned sculptor known for large-scale fiberglass works. For over a decade, he had been crafting a commission for the Denver International Airport, a massive 32-foot-tall blue Mustang with glowing red eyes. Locals would later call the statue Blucifer, fueling conspiracy theories that the airport was cursed. The sculpture, weighing 9,000 pounds, was constructed from heavy, molded fiberglass sections reinforced with an internal steel armature. That day, Jiménez and his team were hoisting the sculpture's largest component, the torso and head, to align it with the lower legs. The section was suspended by a heavy-duty cable hoist system attached to a steel I-beam in the high studio ceiling. The workspace was dense with welding equipment, molds, and tools, leaving little room for air. Jiménez stood directly next to the suspended sculpture, using his hands to guide the massive object as the electric winch motor hummed above. He signaled for micro-adjustments, attempting to line up the internal mounting bolts. As the piece shifted into position, the distribution of weight on the rigging changed. A critical mechanical failure occurred in the hoisting system. A connection point in the rigging failed under the shifting load. The torso did not drop straight down. The remaining line caused it to swing violently in a wide pendulum arc. The mass carried enough momentum to overpower anything in its path. The sculpture swung directly into Jiménez, pinning him against a steel support column. The hard, raw edge of the fiberglass crushed his leg against the beam, damaging major blood vessels and causing rapid blood loss. The sheer weight of the object kept him trapped against the column, preventing any self-extraction. He died before emergency responders could arrive to lift the sculpture. The work was later completed by his sons and installed in 2008, fulfilling the commission that he never saw finished. The Umbrellas Incident, California. On October 26, 1991, the Tejon Pass in California was filled with visitors. The artist Cristo had installed 1,760 massive yellow umbrellas across 18 miles of the valley floor. Each umbrella stood nearly 20 feet tall, weighed 488 pounds, and was anchored to a steel base buried in the ground. Lori Keevil-Mathews, a 33-year-old insurance agent, had visited the site to view the installation. The geography of the pass creates a natural wind tunnel. That afternoon, wind speeds increased rapidly, funneling through the canyons. The umbrellas were designed to withstand normal wind loads, but the aerodynamics of the open canopies acted like massive sails. One umbrella, positioned on a steep slope, caught a concentrated burst of wind. The yellow nylon fabric was stretched tight over the aluminum ribs, creating a surface area of several hundred square feet. As the wind accelerated, it pushed into the underside of the canopy. The vibration traveled down the 20-foot pole into the base. The soil around the anchor plate began to fracture. Small fissures opened in the dry earth as the steel spikes levered upwards against the resistance of the ground. The air pressure underneath the fabric generated thousands of pounds of lift and torque, transferring the energy directly into the base plate. The steel anchor could not withstand the leverage. The force ripped the 488-pound structure from the ground, pulling the stakes free. It did not just fall. The slope caused it to tumble end over end, accelerating as it rolled. The heavy steel pole struck the ground and vaulted forward, moving erratically across the terrain. Lori stood near a large boulder, viewing the landscape, her back turned to the slope. The loose umbrella struck her, pinning her body against the rock face with crushing force. The impact caused severe blunt force trauma to her chest and spine. She died from her injuries at the scene. Cristo ordered the immediate dismantling of the entire project worldwide following the accident. The Umbrellas Incident, Japan. On October 31, 1991, workers in the Ibaraki prefecture of Japan rushed to remove Cristo's blue umbrellas. The deinstallation had been ordered immediately after the fatality in California just days earlier. The site was located in a wet, rice paddy valley. Masaaki Nakamura, a 51-year-old crane operator, was tasked with lifting the heavy umbrellas from their bases. The ground was muddy from recent rains, and the schedule was compressed in order to remove the structures quickly. Nakamura operated a mobile crane with a hydraulic extending boom. He maneuvered the machine into position in order to hoist a 488-pound umbrella from the saturated soil. Above the site, high-voltage power lines spanned the valley. The wires were suspended high above the ground, but the extended reach that was required to lift the umbrella brought the metal boom into critical proximity. On top of this, the damp air and wet ground increased the risk of electrical conductivity. As Nakamura raised the boom in order to clear the umbrella from the suction of the mud, the metal arm swung upward. He did not make direct contact with the wire. Instead, the boom just entered the electrical arc zone of a 65,000-volt line. The high voltage bridged the air gap, creating an invisible arc of plasma that struck the metal crane. The current traveled instantly down the boom, bypassing the tires, and grounded through the controls in the cab where Nakamura sat. He was electrocuted instantly. The voltage was sufficient to cause immediate cardiac arrest. The project, intended to connect two continents in art, had ended with a fatality on both sides of the ocean. The Walker Art Center collapsed. On November 18, 1971, a crew was working at the Walker Art Center in Minneapolis. They were installing sculpture number 3 by the minimalist artist Richard Serra. The piece consisted of 2 square steel plates, each weighing 5 tons. The design called for the plates to be balanced against each other at a precise angle, held in place only by friction and gravity, like a house of cards. Raymond Johnson, a 34-year-old rigger, was positioning the plates. The installation plan required a specific sequence of temporary bracing in order to hold the steel stable until the balance point was locked. Johnson was working near the base of the sculpture, checking the alignment of the bottom edge. The physics of the installation relied entirely upon the opposing weight of the plates. There were no bolts anchoring them to the floor, and the center of gravity was high. The margin for error was non-existent. As the crew adjusted the angle in order to achieve the final form, a support brace failed or slipped out of position. The friction hold between the plates broke. One of the 5-ton plates lost its equilibrium. With the balance broken, it toppled forward under its own mass. The steel plate slammed flat onto the concrete floor. Johnson was in its path. The weight crushed him instantly against the ground. The investigation later revealed that the steel fabricators had provided faulty instructions for the bracing system. The artist, Richard Serra, was cleared of negligence, but the incident highlighted the lethal physics inherent in minimalist sculpture. The Pope John Paul II Crucifix. On April 24, 2014, a crowd gathered in Cevo, Italy. They were visiting a shrine dedicated to Pope John Paul II days before his canonization. The centerpiece was a curved wooden crucifix that stood nearly 100 feet tall. It was designed to look like a modern arching bow with a 1,323-pound statue of Jesus fixed to the top. Marco Gusmini, a 21-year-old pilgrim with a mild mobility impairment, stood beneath the arch with a group. The wood of the cross had been exposed to the alpine weather for years. Moisture had seeped into the laminated timber beams. Inside the structure, the wood fibers had rotted, silently losing their tensile strength. The curve of the design placed constant stress on the weakened material. As the structure held its own weight along with the heavy bronze statue at the apex, the internal fibers began to separate. As the group stood below, the wood snapped. The sound was a loud crack, like a gunshot. The massive arch lost its tension and collapsed downward. The crowd scattered in panic. Marco attempted to run, but his movement was slower than the others. The heavy timber and the statue crashed onto the platform. Marco was struck directly by the falling structure. He died instantly from crushing injuries. In a tragic coincidence, Marco lived on a street named after Pope John XXIII, who was being canonized alongside John Paul II that same week. The Dreamspace V Disaster. On July 23, 2006, the Dreamspace V installation was opened to the public in Riverside Park, Chester-le-Street, England. It was a massive, translucent, inflatable maze, covering an area half the size of a football pitch. visitors could walk inside the colorful air-filled PVC tunnels. Elizabeth Collings, 68, and Claire Furmedge, 38, were inside the structure with dozens of others navigating the soft corridors. The weather was warm, but the wind was picking up speed. The structure was anchored to the ground with a series of ropes and stakes driven into the soil. As a strong gust hit the park, the aerodynamic lift generated by the curved plastic surface increased drastically. The entire maze acted like a giant wing. The upward force on the anchors exceeded the friction grip in the soil. The ropes pulled tight, straining against the earth. One by one, the stakes zipped out of the ground like a zipper failing. The entire structure, weighing several tons, lifted into the air. It rose 30 feet, carrying the people inside with it. The maze flipped over in the wind, disorienting those trapped within the tunnels and causing them to slide toward the openings. At the apex of the flight, the passengers fell. Collings and Furmedge were ejected from the open tunnels and struck the ground of a nearby car park. Both women died from multiple traumatic injuries. 13 others were injured. The artist, Maurice Aegis, was later convicted of health and safety breaches for failing to calculate the wind load correctly. Gravity is not a critic. It is a constant force that waits for the slightest weakness. For these victims, the price of a single failure, a rotted beam, a snapped cable, or a loose stake, was the difference between a monument and a memory. Life is fragile. Treat today like it matters.